Everyone, welcome to Austin Custom Brass. Thank you so much. I would like to thank XO Brass for helping us make this happen. And please join me in welcoming John Fedchock to Austin Custom Brass. Awesome. It's a real honor, it's a pleasure. If you, I'm sure you guys are, but if not, please be aware you get to hear from one of the masters of jazz, not just trombone, but one of the masters of jazz in America right now. Fantastic trombonist, composer, arranger. I'm sure he will tell you more. Otherwise, spend some time looking up his history and who he's played with, what he's done and accomplished. It's a real honor, like I said, to be able to present a Masterclass with Mr. John Fedchock. And again, thank you to XO Brass for helping us make this possible.
Yeah, so are you all trombonists? Most of you. No. We can take this any way that works best for you all. So whatever you think you're inquisitive about, I'm happy to answer any and all questions. Rather than just go on a spiel, I'll give you a little background on myself. But after that, if you have like something you want to address specifically, I'm happy to do that regarding either technique or being a working trombonist or just being a professional musician in general. I'm happy to answer any and all of those questions. I know we're basically all kind of at all different levels of playing here, but to be honest, all the things that I would talk about regarding technique involve the stuff you learn right from the beginning. So a little background on me: I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and got interested in music at age 9 when they took all of us into a room with all the instruments, and I walked right to the trombone, and
Awesome.
been playing it ever since. But my parents were not necessarily, they weren't musicians. We had music in the house, but it was kind of nondescript, just general music that was in the day. And so it wasn't really until I was about 13 that I had an uncle that gave me some big band recordings. He said, if you're going to play trombone, you got to know who Tommy Dorsey is. So he gave me 2 double album sets of Tommy Dorsey. And at that stage of my playing, it just sounded like it was a completely different instrument to me, the control he had and everything. But it got me interested in listening to big band music. And when I was in high school, Woody Herman's band came to my school to play a concert. And I figured it would be kind of like all that old nostalgia stuff. But they were playing really modern things, Chick Corea, John Coltrane, music of the day. So it led me to believe at the time, and it was true, that genre wasn't completely gone, wasn't a museum piece. It was something that was a living, breathing thing that maybe I could get involved in. So I wanted to stay in music and decided to major in music at Ohio State University as a music education major. At that time, I didn't have enough experience playing to really feel like I could be a performance major. And I was spot on with that, because at the end of my freshman year, I played a jury and almost got dropped from the music program because I was so far behind the curve. Fortunately, my trombone teacher stuck up for me and gave me a new lease on life there. So I didn't want anybody taking away something I wanted to do more than anything. So that summer, I really started practicing hard, and from then on, it was, 4, sometimes 5 hours a day practicing, broken up throughout the day. During the time I was in school, they started a jazz degree, and rather than switch degrees, I just started taking those classes, and I ended up getting both degrees in music ed and in jazz studies, both of which have helped me considerably in what I do. But one of my goals was to get into the Eastman School of Music for grad school, because I found out that that's where Woody Herman was getting all his trombone players. So I figured there was something there I needed to access to be able to enter the professional world in one of those kinds of gigs. So I did. I got into Eastman, and I majored in jazz studies, graduate school. I was there for a year, and after the first year, met the right people that knew people on the road and got called to go out on the road. So I didn't finish my graduate work right away, but about 5 years later, we had a 5-month break, and I went back and finished my second year of grad school in 5 months, and then went back out on the road for another couple of years. So I was on the road with Woody Herman for 7 years, playing what we call one-nighters. We were in a different town every night for the most part, and out, like, living on the road, up to 46 weeks a year, traveling by bus mostly, different town every night. And after those 7 years, during that time I started writing for the band, became his musical director. After I left the band, right around the time where Woody Herman got very sick, and he never came back out at that time. So I finished out that tour and moved to New York. And over the course of those 7 years, a lot of people that I knew that went through the band and that we met through the band moved to New York, or were living in New York. So I had a network of folks there, plus I had a little bit of a track record, having worked for Woody and done recordings for him, and people sort of knew my name. So I got past a couple of those painful first steps when you first move into a new town and nobody knows who you are. But with that said, I still had to kind of do anything and everything to make a buck, which I did. But I always really wanted to do jazz, so about a year and a half after moving to New York, started a big band, which I still have. It's been over 30 years now, and it's been over 30 years since our first album. And the more jazz work that started to kind of blossom from my recordings and touring and all that came, then I started to pass on some of the other kind of general business kind of playing work in the city. But I was doing all kinds of playing and writing in the city for a long time, recording work and things like that, which I still occasionally get. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. You know, that's kind of in a snapshot what my career has been since the beginning, and it's all been kind of motivated by love for playing the trombone and love for playing jazz. And I know a lot of folks that have moved to big towns that have those same interests, but kind of get caught up in, you know, something else might pay a little more, or something else might be easier to handle. So one thing I'd recommend for any of you that are interested in music and carrying on in music is just remember what really drove you to be interested in music. And for me, it was always, you know, jazz. The main thing about jazz that I love is just the improvisation aspect, self-expression, being able to communicate through music. Really helped me to, I mean, in general, helped me to communicate verbally with people. You just get used to that kind of dynamic between 3 or 4 folks at a time. And so I would just recommend to, you know, whatever that interest is that brings you into music, kind of keep that as your guiding light somewhere in the back. And if for some reason you're pulled one way or the other because of money or needs, or you know, who's calling you and who's not calling you, just remember that that's still there, and you want to kind of focus your energies toward that. It's because, you know, if you're doing what you love, then it's not really a job. So I know a lot of folks in New York that are very successful musicians, but they're working musicians, meaning they're going to work every day. It feels like work to them, and I just didn't want that. So my goal is to, every time I play my horn, to enjoy myself. So that's what I've been doing for, you know, since, you know, 35 years ago in New York City. So with that said, does anybody have any questions, thoughts about anything in particular you'd like me to kind of start gearing this talk to? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your time with Kendor and maybe your time with IAJE?
Just in general?
Yeah, how did that come into your picture?
Kendor Music is a publishing company. They do a lot of big band writing. When I was with Woody Herman, we did a couple Grammy nominated records, a lot of my charts. So they were interested in, you know, I just approached them because at the time they were publishing Thad Jones' music and Bob Brookmeyer's music and Toshiko Akiyoshi's music and all those more challenging pieces of music. And the music I was writing was somewhat challenging. So they were the first people I went to because they were putting a lot of that stuff out at the time, and they were, you know, artistically speaking, that's kind of, I didn't want to have to bend a little bit, and I've never been that kind of writer anyway. I've never really, other than some early jobs in New York, I've never really done like work for hire, just kind of writing in a generic way. I like kind of do my own thing. So I didn't want to have to bend too much to take my voice away when writing. So, but the first album we did with Woody, 1986, and they immediately took 4 or 5 charts from that album and published those, which are still, I think, probably among the ones people mention to me the most, because they were the first ones. And then, so I established a relationship with them for many, many years. And then, until recently, established a new relationship with a company called E-Jazz Lines, which, they're kind of the same philosophy, is they, however you want to write, they'll publish it. And they also were one of the first companies to deal with direct downloads. So a lot of the stuff I had with Kendor went out of print, and they couldn't afford to like print another 500 charts up just for, in case they got called to replace parts for some 5 or 6 people that needed it. But unfortunately, when they went out of print, after that last printing, they just tossed the plates. So there was no, they would have had to get them recopied and everything, and so I got back the rights to that music and worked out a deal with E-Jazz Lines to put it out. So now most of my music, other than a couple of things, are available through E-Jazz Lines. So if you go to that website and type in my name, they'll all kind of come up.
Did you bring any CDs with you?
I did bring some CDs. They're in the back room. If anyone's interested, I forgot to bring them out here.
This is the J.J. Johnson.
I have a new album dedicated to J.J. Johnson that just came out in October, really, end of September. And I've been touring to promote the album. One of the gigs is tonight at the Blue Room. So I hope you all come by. We're doing all music from that album with a few extra things that didn't get on the album. But it'll be fun. Starts at 8:30 and 10, and with a great Kansas City rhythm section. When I recorded the album, I did it in Indianapolis, because that's where JJ was from, and used Indianapolis musicians, like the cream of the crop there. And so I've been kind of carrying on that thing wherever I tour. I've been using a local rhythm section of the best players in the area. So I did 4 gigs in Ohio. I did some gigs in Indianapolis, or Indiana. I was in New Orleans last week, here this week, and then in about 2 weeks I'm doing a gig in Paris. And then the following week after that I'll be in the Delaware Water Gap area of New York, in the New York, Pennsylvania area there. So this was J.J. Johnson's centennial year. He would have been 100 years old this year. So I recorded the gig pretty close to his birthday earlier in the year, and it came out at the end. I wanted to get it out before the year was up, because this was his centennial year, and I didn't want to have to explain it all next year, Oh, here's an album for the centennial, but that was last year. You don't want to make it seem like it's old news. So I'm glad it came out in the fall, and we were able to get it going. It's doing pretty well on the radio too. So yeah. So I hope you all come out tonight. So I do have some of the J.J. Johnson CDs, and I have a couple other quartet CDs of mine from past years. Trombone questions, yeah. Any questions?
This is a question for your time on the road.
Yeah.
You have, I mean, surely there are lots of wild experiences. Was there anything that you, like something that you learned that came from a specific experience that it would be helpful to somebody who is trying to?
Well, the main thing for me, the 2 things that really helped shape me when I was on the road was, number 1, we were riding on the bus all day. All I was doing was listening. And if you want to play jazz, if you're not listening constantly, that language isn't going to seep into your ear. So that was a big thing. And then every night, being on a band that allowed you to express yourself every night. And it didn't have to be in the same way. His band, Woody, was pretty tolerant about people exploring ways to approach the same music. So you didn't have to play the same exact type of thing. Even if it was a short solo, I would always try to do something a little different to test something I was working on, or that it's something that I'd listened to or transcribed or whatever it was. So number one is immersing yourself in the music, and then number two is finding some way to do it every day and to approach new things in your playing every day. Whether it's at home playing with backing tracks, or just by yourself, or getting together with people. And the one other thing I would say is just get out to hear live music as much as you can, because seeing people do it answers so many more questions than listening to the way they do it. You know, especially regarding just how a player approaches the instrument, relaxation, all those types of things, really invaluable. So there was a great player in Columbus, Ohio, when I was at school, named Gary Carney. I used to go here and play every week. You know, never once asked him a question about theory or improvisation, just kind of took it in and watched him and got a sense for how he approached playing small group jazz and just the dynamic on the stage. It was a big learning experience, even though we never talked about, you know, the little details. I got those because I would recognize what he was doing from having listened to recordings of J.J. Johnson or Carl Fontana or people like that. Those were people that were strong in his playing. So if I'd hear something that kind of sounded like Carl Fontana, then I'd take note, okay, how did he play that? Or so when I was working on those types of things, transcriptions or whatever, then I would kind of put that in my mind's eye as to what it should look like. And that helped me a lot. So you can get some of that from YouTube, but it's very two-dimensional, and a lot of times it's not always on the player the whole time, so you can't really get a feeling for them in the entirety of the piece, just in the moment they're soloing or parts of their solo. So get out and see people play live. And it's also interesting to see people play live because many times, you know, even the best of players are not necessarily happy with what they play, but they find a way to make the adjustments, you know, on the fly. It's like, how many of you all are football fans? If you're not a football fan in Kansas City, come on. But I mean, you know, like, think about Patrick Mahomes, you know, the level he improvises at. He has a given play, and they have things that are supposed to happen, but they don't always happen. And it's the same thing on the bandstand. You may have and that's why it's also good not to have preconceived ideas as to how you're gonna play. I usually like to start my solos from kind of nothing. Because if you have an idea of something you're gonna do and things don't fall in place, it's gonna throw you. So I usually let the moment take me wherever it's gonna take me. But even the greatest players sometimes are not happy with what they do. But the thing is, what do they do to make that music? To take something that maybe didn't go the way they wanted to, but then they make these adjustments, and it's like, you know, if you heard it on an album, you say, oh, they meant to do that. But when you see someone play, you can kind of witness their thought process in a way that you can't when you're just listening to it on a recording. I think that really important. So for me, traveling, there wasn't one particular thing. It was, I mean, doing the recordings was a learning experience, but playing every night and listening every day and trying to find a way to have those two connect was really big for me.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask a different direction kind of
Please.
question. I'm not a trombonist, I'm a brass player, but for me and for others who might want to think about pedagogy, and I'd just like to see, because you can usually pick up things from lots of different people.
Of course.
If you could talk about and maybe demonstrate fundamentals, kind of early warm-up routine kind of stuff. Just talk about how you approach that
Yeah.
and show us.
Yeah, I mean, as mentioned earlier, all the stuff I do for my warm-up is stuff that we've been told since we first picked up our instruments, you know, sound production, intonation, tonguing, flexibility, all those things. So I have a little routine that I do, and I'll demonstrate some of it, but it can last 4 or 5 minutes, or it can last 45 minutes, depending on how long I dwell on each thing. Now, If I'm warming up backstage or someplace where there's no dressing room or whatever, I have a little practice mute I use. So you can't really work on sound production with a practice mute. But if you've played enough open horn, you know what it feels like to get a good sound. So, and sometimes when I'm playing in a club where with either a bad sound system or the things get kind of loud, you kind of have to play by feel sometimes. So I think it's really important to take note of that stuff when you're doing your warm-up. What does it feel like? Rather, when you get the sound you like, okay, then assess, okay, what does this feel like? What am I feeling in my body? What do my chops feel like? What's my air doing? All those things, so you can, when you get to a point where it's not ideal to hear yourself, you can kind of go into that mode and feel comfortable and just relax with that. Because that's the one thing, when you can't hear yourself well enough, you tend to force things. But if you know what it feels like to play with a good sound and project, then you can kind of do it without having to press. So, but the first thing I do is just some simple breathing exercises, just to kind of get the air moving. I kind of go from least to most as far as activity and involving the horn. So starting out with just the air, getting in touch with the air, either some deep breaths or some simple breathing exercises. For instance, a couple of the breathing exercises, I used to do this at Ohio State. I get there in the morning, first thing in the morning, and I do 20 minutes of breathing exercises before I got the horn out of the case. Not only did it help my air, but it helped me wake up. When you're a college kid, first, 8 in the morning is not fun, especially if you've been out to a club till 1. But yeah, so I would do, deep breaths, of course. I would do crescendo breaths, I do decrescendo breaths, I do these. And then the one thing that really helped me get in touch with my air is with learning about the small air stream. So it would mean taking a full breath. I'd even hold my breath, try to get used to that. Because to be honest, when we're playing our instrument, that's what we're doing. We're just expelling it slowly, but we're not getting any oxygen, right? So get comfortable with not having to breathe, basically. So then I would take, the next concept would be to take the small airstream. So I would take that full breath and then see how long I could exhale into the palm of my hand, like with a very small, like mezzo piano airstream. And try and focus that airstream so you could feel it in your hand, very pointed. Because how many of you can swim? How many think you could do the length of a pool? Okay, how long do you think that would take you to do?
A week. Sorry.
30 seconds, 20 seconds, 30, let's say 30 seconds. How many people think they can hold their breath for 30 seconds then? All of you, right? But how many people think you can play a phrase for 30 seconds? So it's really about controlling the output of the air. So with this exercise, you'll try, see how long you can do that. It's a very small airstream into your palm of your hand, really focused, and see if you can go for 30 seconds, a minute, 90 seconds, as long as you can hold, so you can put the hand as close as you want to your face. So I would do that every day, and it really helped me to control that small airstream that us jazz musicians utilize when we're improvising. So. Oh, I took a breath by mistake. But you get the idea. A long phrase, you can play a couple of choruses on one breath. So I would do that. I would, when I finally got the horn out, I'd take like a Rochou etude and see how far I could play without taking a breath, to really get control of that. So after I could do all the breathing exercises, then I would do like free buzzing with just my chops, with the piano matching pitches. But also then kind of considering that the concept about controlling the small airstream. So like, 30 seconds, right? If I really concentrate, I could probably do about 40 seconds. But that's not as soft as I probably would if I had the horn, because the horn offers you, so then you know. Still had a little left in the tank, but you get the idea. That was about maybe 45 seconds. So, but as you notice, as I was playing, I tried to keep the tone unwavering. And I think that's the thing when people play long tones like that, you hear, and you can hear the inconsistency of the airflow. So if you can focus on that being consistent, then all of a sudden that takes away a lot of problems that you may encounter when you're playing, even if you're playing kind of angular lines. If the air is under control, like you're playing a whole tone, you know. So after I free buzz, when I free buzz, I try to be able to get like a couple of octaves, 2 or 3 octaves together, and then I'll go to the mouthpiece. And I'll do the same thing, but I'll start out, I'll cover the base of the mouthpiece a little bit with my little finger, just because it simulates the resistance the horn gives, right? Because if it's open, that's not the way it sounds or feels when we're playing. You want to simulate the feel. And then I'll do the same thing, but now you wouldn't start, if you picked up the horn, you would start out playing a high B flat, because all the bad habits you've developed since you were a kid are going to cause you to create some kind of problems. But with just the mouthpiece, you're not going to create those problems. So once I get to the point where I can kind of do like glissandos, unbroken glissandos. Or however high I want to go, then I feel like I'm ready, like I've got a grip on the mouthpiece the way it is, I've got my apertures kind of focused, and my airflow is steady and controlling. That's all before I put the mouthpiece on the horn. Then I'll start with long tones in the middle register, kind of that same kind of thing, really long tones. I choose to start on the middle F. And when I say long tones, kind of like I did, not as long, but when I play the first note, obviously our first time we put the horn to our face, it's not going to get the sound that we're looking for immediately. But I try to get the sound as close to as I can, and then I'll take stock into, okay, how's my air moving? How much air am I moving? How fast is the air moving? Where's my tongue in my mouth? What's my posture like? All that stuff. And then I'll move to the next note and try and replicate the same tone quality. And I'll just stay within that same overtone, that medium, the F to B overtone, until I really feels like it's in control. And then the next thing I'll add is legato tonguing. So I get used to the fact that the legato is like a long tone. So. The airstream is the same, I'm just interrupting the air. Once I feel like that's working, then I'll start working in some slide technique, getting my tongue and my hand in sync. Really trying to get everything like locked in. How many have seen the original movie, The Karate Kid? The original one. Okay, these are all the paint the fence, wax the car kind of things that you just do over and over and over again, and then when you get into the heat of the moment, you don't have to think about them. So I will do that, and then I'll do a lip slur to the bottom, just a simple one, F to the B flat, all the way down the slide. But then at the same time, I'll also play it marcato, where I'm really focusing in on each note. So I'm also working on my accuracy, and also with some kind of time reference. And then I'll move up to the next note in the overtone series, which is what? Anybody? The B flat, but I won't start on the B flat. I've been spending all this time on the F, getting a good sound, so I'll start on the F. Here. When I first hit it, didn't have the sound. Try to match it as best you can. Each overtone has its own quirks. But the idea is, as I move my way up, then the work I did in the earlier overtone is going to transfer up through the horn. So it's going to keep your sound quality, your tone, your timbre, everything's going to be similar going up through the registers. So then I'll do the same kind of thing. I'll do long tones, legato tonguing, lip slur to the bottom, marcato version of that. And then after that one, I'll move to the next overtone, which is the D overtone, but I'll start with the B flat and fifth. And work my way up. So as I do this, each tier has a similar tone quality. So, by the end, they all have the kind of a similar sound to them. So that's kind of how I approach it, all the way to the extreme upper register, really. Doing things like that, and always referring back to the bottom, so I make sure that my sound is not only kind of uniform, but also that my flexibility throughout the registers is strong and solid and in control, because a lot of what I do requires that. I don't know if that answers your question enough.
Thank you very much, yes.
Yeah, so I like, if I'm warming up for a gig and I only have 5 minutes, I can kind of do all that in 5 minutes. But if I'm at home and I have a chance to really take some time with it, I'll spend more time on all these little elements to make sure that then when I want to practice, I can also use it as a checklist as to what's working that day and what's not. A lot of people just think of warm-up as, oh, okay, I gotta play this to get ready to play. But if you think about it as a checklist, okay, today my sound's not very good. My tonguing's pretty good today. All right, well, my sound's bad. All right, so I'll spend more time on things like legato, extended things, long tones, and work on sound, because the tonguing is okay for today. Rather than working on the same thing every day and you don't really improve as quickly. I like to improve like in all aspects all at once. So if the tonguing's hanging in there for that day, I'll use it for upper register or flexibility or something like that. So then the next day, we're still on the same kind of evenness involving all that stuff. Did someone else have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, so being where you're at today, most of your day is probably consumed by rehearsals, performances, and then just the administration of the business side of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still get any time to cut out of your day to actually sit down and shed? I mean, do you
Sure.
still
Oh,
get
yeah.
time to practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on the road all the time. I mean, there's times, every year is a little different as to my schedule, which is great, because I don't have to like say, okay, November is always, I'm always on the road. Sometimes November I'm in New York, sometimes, and I occasionally will go to an artist retreat in upstate New York to write and practice and do all that stuff for a couple of weeks. So it is, the writing part's the little harder challenge, because if I have a minimum amount of time, I'm gonna put it in on the horn. I've always thought of myself as a player first, and a player that writes rather than a writer that plays. So that's the only challenge, is finding time to write, because that involves having solitude,
Yeah.
being with your thoughts and no distractions, which, in this world today, it's hard to do.
What advice would you have for a youngster just starting out?
Well, if you love doing it, that's the biggest thing. I mean, if you don't love it, then it'll be fun to be a social event or whatever, but if you really love to do it, find a teacher that you like, you know, that will be someone that can not only teach you, but also direct you to where you can go hear music, maybe introduce you to some musicians in the area so you could go hear some live music, things like that. Like when I was a kid, my father sat in every one of my lessons, up through high school, just because he loved listening to me play, you know. And my teacher was not a classical guy. He was just like a working business, general business kind of musician. His name was Billy Lang, and he had a band in Cleveland, and he played gigs in Cleveland. He was a great player, and he was on the road years ago in the 40s, and his whole thing was teaching trombone with the practical aspect of it. Not, you know, like, if he wants to make a living, how's he gonna do that? You know, so we would play duets, so I'd hear his phrasing, and we switched parts, you know. It wasn't all classical stuff. It was popular music, and it was technique and scales and things like that, which really helped me a lot to become the musician I am. I was a little hampered when I got to Ohio State, because when I went to do my audition, I asked someone, what do I need to play? And they said, well, you come play an etude. I didn't know what an etude was. So, because I never played etudes. I was playing out of the Arbenz book, I was playing scales, and I was playing popular tunes. So it was great for what I ended up doing, but it kind of got me, took me a while to catch up in college when I got into college. So I would say study with someone who's very well rounded and is, you know, if it's a classical person, it should be a classical person that's at least jazz friendly, because not everybody's gonna get a gig in a symphony, you know, and if you decide you wanna play music for a living, you've gotta do all these other things, and if you're not exposed to it, you're gonna get put in an awkward situation where you're not able to do it well, and then all of a sudden, no one's calling you for that stuff. So I think it's really, really essential that you learn the whole thing, not just the instrument and the classical studies, but really learn how to play music.
Yeah.
That's a big thing that really served me well. If you can feel the music, you know, and not just play the notes. So that's my recommendation. Yeah. And then also just remember that if you're having fun, it's not like you have to be a professional musician either. You know, it's just, but after high school, continue playing. Because I can't tell you the number of people that come up to me and say, yeah, I used to play in high school, I really wish I still played.
Yeah.
Because it's a great release, it's relaxing, it's, you know, if you enjoy doing it, it's like nothing else, because it's very meditative.
Yeah.
I mean, just the act of playing a long tone is
Yeah.
like, you know. Anybody else have yeah.
So, I have a question about like building relationships and like networking yourself. So like, what do you look for in people that you're like tonight, like for sidemen? What are you looking for people in that? And then how do you portray those attributes for yourself to play with other people, for them to hire you?
Well, that's a pretty long answer. I'll try to scale it down a little bit. The big thing in the professional music scene, freelance scene, is just having really good people skills and being able to talk with people you never met, making a good impression over the phone, and then when you do show up somewhere, you're doing the right thing, wearing the right clothes, showing up at the right time, and not doing more than is asked of you. If you try to do more than is asked of you, people can read that the wrong way, like you're trying to one-up them, or you're trying to steal their gig, or you're whatever it is. So you get hired to play third trombone, you just play the best third trombone you can, you know, and think of, you know. And really, it's, once again, it's just like the things we learned from the very beginning. The things that keep you working are playing in tune, playing with a good sound, blending with the other players, and being able to follow whoever's leading the section or whatever it is. Now, regarding me and my touring stuff, I've been doing this for a long time, so I've heard a lot of musicians in a lot of areas, but sometimes you get to a point where you don't really know who might be in the area that you'd wanna play with. But I know people that know those people. So I will, through my network of friends and contacts, I'll contact you. Who's the best drummer in town? Who plays piano and would fit this type of music that I'm gonna be doing from this album? Because this album stuff we're doing is all kind of, you know, bebop, hard bop music. So you don't want someone that's ultra traditional, but you also don't want someone who's ultra, you know, exploratory either, because it's gonna kind of ruin the vibe. You want people that are creative. I want people that are creative, and but also their personality has to be a certain way, because it's just, to me, it's like working with, or going into a room and talking with 3 other people. You know, if somebody's a drag, you're not gonna wanna talk to them. You're gonna end up talking to the other 2 people, and it can be like that in a small group. People tend to take on their actual personality in their musical personality. So if somebody's a little overbearing as a person, many times they can be overbearing as a musician. And the way I like to play, I like to have it be more give and take, a little bit more, I don't wanna say, I don't know, just a little more, kind of under the radar a little bit. We're not gonna push anything into anybody's face. It's gonna be, everybody's gonna be expressive, everybody's gonna have their chance to do something, and everybody leaves everybody else space to do what they wanna do. And then you wanna find out who collaboratively works well with the other folks. So it's hit or miss sometimes, but most times, because of my contacts that I've met, it's been a really good experience. And now I pretty much know who to call any place in the country, give or take, you know, somewhere out really, really remote.
Thank you.
I have a question for
Yes.
you. How do you keep yourself, you know, musicians, no one told us when I was in college that you needed to protect your hearing. And then you find out after years of playing in a big band, oh my gosh, I need
Sure.
hearing aids now. This is the thing. What do you do to keep yourself in shape? Because you look great. So it's like, do you do anything, or is this just, I know you married well.
Right, yeah. No, I, for years, I was doing a regular exercise routine. Once I got married, that's kind of, and we got 2 dogs. Now that's changed a bit, because my level of responsibility has changed a little bit. But I've always had kind of a high metabolism, so I haven't really had to worry too much about that stuff. But the hearing thing, I've just been lucky, so far so good, knock on wood. No real significant loss there. And when I first joined Woody Herman's band, I sat in the second chair. Before I moved to the lead chair, I sat in the second chair, which was literally, the snare drum was right here. So, you know, I did almost 3 years like that. But fortunately, I worked with some very good drummers who know how to tune their drums so they don't hurt. But occasionally you play in a small room and it does. So when I moved to New York, I was playing weddings in a wedding band for a while. It got really loud, and I would just wear earplugs, you know, the foam earplugs. Because we were all mic'd. I could hear everything anyway, and it kind of acted as an in-ear monitor, because when you put those in, all you hear is yourself. So it's been pretty good. I'm assuming there's some hearing loss there, but so far I'm doing okay.
Do you do yoga, or, I mean, cause you know, you're on the road and people are like, oh, you gotta try these French fries from this barbecue.
The road part is tough, because I like to eat all that junky food too. So I try to watch what I eat, and I try to stretch as much as I can. And I used to go to the gym every day in the hotel, but now it's changed a bit. So I had a shoulder injury. It's still fine, but it keeps me from doing some of the things I used to do. But yeah, for maybe 15 years, I had a regular regimen, going to the gym and all that stuff. So yeah.
Can you talk about your philosophy on multiple tonguing?
My philosophy? Sure, it's not really a philosophy, but I can tell you what I do. That's-
That'll work.
Yeah. In general, I'd recommend, first of all, when I was in college, I wanted to learn how to do I use, like for really fast stuff, I use a doodle tongue. If you're familiar with that, it's something that was kind of invented. I know it's been talked of that it's been invented, it was invented centuries ago or whatever, but Carl Fontana was the main proponent using that. And there were no books on it or anything, so I just kind of taught myself, and it took me 3 attempts, because it just wasn't working for me. So in those earlier attempts, I'm glad it didn't work, because I got with the metronome and just worked on my single tongue. So, to be able to do that, that's a fast tempo, or medium up tempo. So in general, unless it's really super fast, I don't click into the doodle tongue unless it's like some kind of triplet, arpeggio or something like that. I'm usually single tonguing most of everything, up to like, I don't know, quarter note equals 250, something like that, 300 maybe even, depending. But there's always a case where the drummer might slow down, or the drummer might speed up. So if you're doing something with a doodle tongue and the drummer slows down, you've got to have an area on the metronome where you can do both.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time in that gray area working on that. But so working the single tongue up as fast as I can, and then working on controlling the doodle tongue at slower than I probably would use. But as far as the thing that unlocked it for me was taking the word doodle out of the equation. That oo syllable tended to keep the tongue in the middle of my mouth and in the way of the airstream. So I think more like da 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 da, and you can actually hear the articulation when I do that. And I think about rather than like the L syllable pulling the tongue down, I think about the rebound hitting the top of a hard palate up here. So I can make it as legato or as marked as I want. So I can go or right. So but that really led me to believe that soft U syllable, it pulls the tongue down, and it gave me more definition. So I also discovered that doing it in reverse helps. So in other words, instead of starting with the D syllable, starting with the L syllable. So I like to tell students, to learn how to do the doodle tongue, you have to practice a lot. A lot, right? That's the thing,
Yeah.
Or, because you can't do it a little, right? So, but find ways to, if you can't get it started with the D syllable first, start with the L and see where that takes you. And that may help you get that slap back that I like to use. So if I was warmed up, that a little cleaner, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
And then the same thing, the airstream has to just be doing this.
Do you find that when you go across partial breaks, or like multiple partial breaks, while you're doing that doodle tongue?
Well, that's something you need to practice.
This is
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, like so. And you do you do the 8th note version or the triplet version, the doodle, that. Or you can practice against the grain. Are you familiar with that concept? Right?
Yeah.
Or, but then add the doodle. But yeah, so there's some good books out. Bob McChesney's book, I think, is still the best one out there for learning that technique. But the main thing that you need to do is just get it to speak. You can't just dive into the book if it's not speaking. So I'd spend time just figuring out how to make it speak, maybe with just the mouthpiece. Walking down the street, just if you don't really hear that, like you hear when I'm doing it, then you're not doing it right. If it's just like, it's not gonna work. You need to hear something that's a little more pronounced. So, that would be what I'd recommend. Spend a lot of time just getting it to speak on one note. And then you can do the same thing that I was mentioning with my legato thing. Go, training your hand and your tongue to be in sync. In sports, you have hand-eye coordination, right? Trombone playing, we have hand-tongue coordination. And that's one of the big downfalls of a lot of players is the slide technique has not caught up with their tongue, or vice versa. So I do a lot of practice using the chromatic scale, because that's the one scale you have to tongue everything. And just using little parts of the chromatic scale, like just single tone, right? But if you look, I'm not stopping the slide. I'm treating it like a gliss. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 notes and 4 motions, it's one motion for those 4 notes. Or the ultimate goal would be the whole slide, right? Usually when I first have someone do something, even when they're small, shorter ones, I'll notice the player's upward motion is faster or slower than the other, than the downward motion. So to develop that consistency within the chromatic scale, then all of a sudden everything looks a lot more fluid, it feels a lot more fluid, and your music's gonna sound more fluid. So then the next step I would do would be to add a large motion within that. So now it's 2 long motions and 1 big motion, right? And then focus in on that big motion being as relaxed as the other one. When that feels comfortable and relaxed, just kind of loop it like that, with a metronome, of course. Then start transposing it up by half steps. So now there's 2 big motions, 2 different parts of the measure, 2 different parts of the bar. And as you go up, that will move. So you're training your hand and your tongue to be able to do these big things anywhere in the measure, anywhere on the beat. Which is going to come in handy when you have to play tunes that involve those types of skips in awkward spots. Yes, try it.
Just giving you a time.
You give me okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so, but then once you get like that, then you can kind of string them all together. Right? And as you go up higher, you're not going to get big motions, but you're going to get more contrary motion.
Yeah.
Which is the other thing we fight with all the time, right? You're really trying to make those things feel comfortable and relaxed. So then when you're playing, if you want to, especially as you progress as an improviser, you can be playing more chromatic ideas. And that's the one thing on trombone that's, this is not built for that, right? So we have to really train to get the accuracy with that, so we can execute what we want, what we're hearing in our head.
Cool, thank you.
Any last questions? Yeah.
How did you start learning how to arrange for big band? Like I've started writing and arranging for combos, but I feel like there's just like, it's a whole different ball game essentially to write for.
Well, I mean, for me, it was kind of just like my playing. I was listening. I got the sound of it in my ear. And then when I went to college, I studied with one of the great writing teachers, Rayburn Wright. And he taught kind of like a jazz improviser would do, by studying the score, looking what the greats have done, and analyzing that. But the ultimate thing you need to get in control of, not only the sound of it, but just simple voicing techniques for sections, and there's specific rules regarding where certain notes have to go, what register they have to go, if you're writing for the whole brass section, if you're just writing for the trombones. In general, the trombones need to look like the chord you're writing. Meaning, like, you could write the trumpet section doesn't have to look like that, because many times it'll have upper extensions of the chord that won't look like B flat 7, it'll look like C7 or whatever. So, and then where are these notes placed, where the saxophones go in relation to that? A lot of little rules. Once you get the rules and you have the sound in your ear, then you can kind of hear what's going on when you're listening and know, oh, that's what they're doing there, and kind of approach it that way, so.
And where do you learn the rules from, like a teacher or just like studying?
Yeah, there's a really good book by Gary Lindsay. He used to teach at University of Miami in Florida. Very good book. Starts with small group writing, goes to big band writing. I'd recommend that one pretty highly. And then Rayburn Wright had a book called Inside the Score, which is the one where he studies,
That's the
I think,
Bible.
4 or 5 different arrangers
Yeah.
and their styles. So, and he breaks it down and shows you the voicings and all that, so you can.
And sorry, what was the first book called?
I can't
Gary?
remember, the writer's name is Gary Lindsay,
Gary Lindsay, okay.
yeah,
With an A.
yes, Lindsay,
Thank you.
yeah. And then Inside the Score by Rayburn Wright, yeah. Yes,
In this kind of just like day and age, just as like musicians, how important do you think it is just kind of, you know, to like cover like different musical grounds, like you're a performer, but you also do all this writing, and I think that's kind of become more prominent like nowadays, just musicians also are also like educators, but they're also, you know, composers and arrangers. That's kind of thing that's.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I said at the beginning, though, you do anything and everything,
Yeah,
but always keep in mind what it is you ultimately want to do, because that's where you want to be at the end. You want
Yeah.
to say, I'm doing what I love, and I'm not doing some of these other things. Then you may love doing all that other stuff, then it's a matter of managing your time,
yeah,
that you can do that, yeah. But I think in general, you gotta prioritize one thing over another. I mean, it's really tough to equally prioritize writing and playing. It's two
Mhm.
different mindsets. The writing, for me, I need a lot of solitude, a lot of time away from people, a lot of, you know, playing you can kind of get to right away a little bit once you're
Yeah.
warmed up. Writing, sometimes you could spend a week on something and end up throwing it away, you know? So it depends your level of, you know, tolerance.
yeah. And I guess, how did how did you kind of balance that like prioritization just of like you?
I didn't. I didn't. It was always playing. Right, and the writing happened in my extra spare time.
Sure.
Not even my spare time, my extra spare time.
Yeah. Awesome,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I was curious.
Yeah. I think we're out of time.
Unfortunately, yeah. I
For the
think-
stream, but,